Hello and welcome to English for You. I'm Seb.
I'm Nikki.
And we are still talking about our literature article for this month, Ghost Boys. Okay, so quite a lot happened in the first day of our story, didn't it? We met Jerome Rogers, and he wasn't having a good time,
he was constantly being bullied
right,
in middle school.
And he lived in a dangerous neighborhood, a neighborhood with lots of dangers. That was our vocab word from day one.
But then he met someone.
Yes, he did meet someone.
Carlos.
Carlos, yes, a Mexican-American boy who helps him learn some tricks, or he helps Carlos, and then Carlos in return teaches him some tricks to avoid bullies. But one of these tricks is a little bit, I'm not sure I would recommend this trick, but they do something interesting to get the bullies to go away, don't they?
Yes, they have a toy gun.
Right. Carlos uses a toy gun to scare away some bullies, and he gives it to Jerome. So where we left the article in day one, Jerome had gone outside to play with this gun, and he forgot about some warnings his parents had told him about how he should behave outside. So that's where we left day one. Let's continue with day two of our story now.
Reading.
Ghost Boys. Jerome looks down. He sees a black boy on the floor in a pool of dark red blood. The boy is dead. The boy is him. There's a bullet wound in his back where the police officer shot him. Later, the officer will say that he thought Jerome was older. He'll say that he looked like a dangerous man. He'll say that the toy gun looked real. Now, Jerome observes as his family grieve for him, and the police officer defends himself. Jerome's not alone, though. He is joined by another ghost boy, Emmett Till. He lived decades before Jerome, but died in a similar way. Emmett was murdered in 1955 for appearing to insult a white lady. Later, Jerome and Emmett meet a living girl who can see and hear them. Sarah is the police officer's daughter. She knows that her father did something wrong, but she doesn't know what to do about it. Jerome and Emmett tell her what happened to them. From their words, she will learn to fight for justice and help prevent their stories from repeating.
The article starts by saying Jerome looks down.
Okay. And now we can see next, he sees a black boy on the floor in a pool of dark red blood. Okay, so a very graphic image there. But who could this boy be?
The boy is dead. The boy is him, Jerome.
Oh, okay, I see. So Jerome
is dead.
Jerome is dead. He's looking down at his own body on the floor. It says in the story, there's a bullet wound in his back where the police officer shot him. Okay, so what we're seeing here in the first three sentences is we're kind of looking back on something that happened in between day one of our story and day two. So after we left Jerome, he went outside to play, and a police officer thought he had a gun and shot him. So we can see that there is a bullet in his back. Now, this is the cause of the problem. A bullet is a noun, and it's a small piece of metal that gets fired out of a gun. Bullets can seriously hurt you if they hit your body, and people often die when they are hit by one. Bullets work by being shot out of a gun. When you shoot a gun, you squeeze it like this, so you pull the trigger, so the bullet comes out. Shoot is a verb, but it can also be used as a noun. If we talk about the shooting, a shooting, for example, we're talking about an instance in which a gun has been fired many times and possibly many people have been killed. So we can actually describe what has happened in this story as a shooting. Let's look at an example sentence now. The sheriff loaded his gun by putting 6 bullets into the back of it.
那在警察射他的地方呢，有一个子弹的伤口。Bullet 指的就是子弹、枪弹。那我们常常会听到 bulletproof， 意思就是防弹的。
Exactly. And this bullet has caused a serious wound in Jerome's body. Now, a wound is a part of someone's body that has been damaged and isn't healed yet. If someone stabbed you with a knife, then the hole in where the knife had gone into your body is the wound. There is not supposed to be a hole in your body, and it's causing your body lots of problems. Therefore, it's a wound. Wound is a very broad term, and we can use it to describe a lot of different problems. So a broken arm or a broken leg, these are both wounds. But if you cut your finger on a piece of paper, the cut on your finger is also a type of wound. Lastly, remember when you're using this word how we pronounce it. We pronounce the OU in wound with an oo sound. We don't say wound. Wound is also a word, but it's the past tense of another verb which means to coil something tightly around something else. So let's look at one last example here. It took many months for Johnson's wound to heal.
Wound 是名词，伤口就是可能你被捅一刀，然后那个捅一刀的地方就是 wound。那我们也会用形容词 wounded 来说一个人是受伤的。Someone is injured. For example, a wounded soldier 指的就是伤兵。And the article says, later, the officer will say that he thought Jerome was older.
Okay, so it looks like the officer is giving an excuse. He's giving a reason that says, what I did wasn't as bad as it looked.
Yeah.
So often when we say someone is giving an excuse, we're saying that they're trying to make themselves look better, and it's normally kind of a negative thing to do, to give an excuse. The story continues, he'll say that he looked like a dangerous man. So the officer is saying, I didn't think that Jerome was a boy. I thought he was an older man.
He'll say that the toy gun looked real.
Now, Jerome, let's continue with the story. Now, Jerome observes as his family grieve for him, and the police officer defends himself. So the idea we've got here is that Jerome is a ghost and he's watching things happen on Earth after he dies. The idea of the police officer defending himself is saying that he is probably in court maybe, or he's being asked questions about what he did, and he's giving reasons or excuses for his actions. Now, there's a couple of useful words in that sentence. The first one is observe. When we observe something, we watch it without taking part in it. So observe is a verb here. Because Jerome is dead now, he can't speak to his family or he can't interact with them. All he can do is watch as they grieve and suffer his death. In a similar way, you are observing me as I explain this story. You can't ask me any questions right now because this is a video, so you're just observing. Let's look at an example for observe. The medical students observed as the doctor showed them how to perform the difficult operation.
现在呢 Jerome 就观察他的家人替他哀悼，还有那个警察为自己的行为辩护。Observe 是动词，观察或是监视 to watch something carefully， 或者是注意到 notice 的意思。那它的名词是 observation。接下来还有一个动词是 grief， 指的就是哀悼，或者是为某人的去世感到很悲伤。那它的名词也是 grief， 可是拼起来不一样，是 grief， 指的是悲痛、悲伤。那再来呢 defend 这个动词是为什么东西辩护，像是如果我们在玩 werewolf 狼人杀的时候，假设你被 accused for being a werewolf， you will have to defend yourself and try to convince people that you're not. 那接着课文就说 Jerome's not alone though.
Okay, so Jerome is not alone. So we have this idea that there's probably other ghosts.
Ghosts.
Yes, exactly. This story says he is joined by another ghost boy, Emmett Till. Now, Emmett Till is a very important character. We're going to talk more about the importance of what he means to the story in day 3. But first, let's just look at a little bit of a background to Emmett.
And the article says he lived decades before Jerome, but died in a similar way.
Okay, so he died in a similar way. So we'll get more into what this similarity is and why it's important. But firstly, let's look at that word decade. Decade is a noun, and it's a period of 10 years. So when we say that Emmett Till is decades older than Jerome, we mean that he is 20 or 30 or maybe even 40 years older than him, perhaps even older than that. In this way, we use decades to say that a lot of time has passed. However, we don't use decade to talk about our age. So for example, I'm 27 years old, but I would never say I am 2.7 decades old. This just sounds really, really strange. Now, we can use decades in lots of different situations, not just to talk about the relative ages of people. Here's an example of that. Less than a decade after Taipei 101 was built, it was no longer the tallest building in the world.
Decade 指的就是10年的时间，那在这边他用了 decades 复数，就是指好几十年的事情。那例句说，在101被盖好不到10年的时间，它就已经不是世界上最高的建筑了。
Okay, so we also saw the word similar, which is an adjective. And when two things are similar, we mean that they look a lot like each other. It has the opposite meaning of the word different. So, for example, two siblings, a brother and a sister, or a brother and a brother, sister and a sister, two siblings that look a lot like each other will be similar or similar in appearance. And people might even think that they are the same person. There could be many similarities between them, such as the color of their hair, the color of their eyes, and the shape of their face. One thing you should know about the word similar, though, is it means that there's always a tiny bit of difference between two things or two people. If two things are exactly the same, then we say they are identical. Now let's look at an example sentence for similar. After Claire learned Spanish, she wanted to learn a similar language, so she decided to go for French.
And the article says Emmett was murdered in 1955 for appearing to insult a white lady.
Okay, so by insult there, we mean that he said something rude or he said something that upset this lady. However, we also saw that he appeared to insult. So when we use the phrase appear to, we mean that it looks like someone did something. So we don't actually know that Emmett Till did anything wrong. It's just maybe that someone thought that he did something wrong, or someone made up a reason why they wanted to hurt him and said, well, it appeared like he was insulting someone. Anyway, let's continue with the story. Later, Jerome and Emmett meet a living girl who can see and hear them.
And that girl, the article says it's Sarah, is the police officer's daughter.
Yes, so Sarah is also very important to the story because she helps them create changes on Earth. The article says she knows that her father did something wrong, but she doesn't know what to do about it.
那在之后，他们就遇到了一个还在世的女孩，叫做 Sarah， 她就是那位开枪的警察的女儿。那她也知道她的爸爸有做错事，可是她却不知道怎么办才好。And the article says Jerome and Emmett tell what happened to them. Tell her.
So the art story continues. From their words, she will learn to fight for justice and help prevent their stories from repeating. Okay, so the word prevent is our last vocab word for this day. It's a verb, and when we prevent something, we stop it from happening before it happens. If you prevent a fire, that fire never happens because you are very careful not to let anything catch flame and not to let a fire start. So there is no real problem. Now, there is a slight difference between prevent and another word, recover. Both of these have good endings. So in prevent, you never let the fire happen. In recover, if you recover from a problem or a disease or something like that, you get better from it. So you feel okay, but you were sick before. So with prevent, you stop bad things from happening, and with recover, you get better after something bad happens. In our example sentence, though, the main character doesn't get to do anything. That's because it goes like this. Becky's mum prevented her from talking to her friends by taking away her cell phone. Okay, last we've got our grammar for today. To stop, keep, or prevent an object from verbing. Okay, if that makes no sense, it's fine. We're going to talk about what that means and how you can use it in a second. So it actually has a lot to do with the sentence we just learned. Like the word prevent, we can also use other verbs such as get and keep to talk about stopping things from happening before they happen. With all of these words, we have to use the same grammatical structure. First, we have the verbs, so stop, keep, and prevent. Then an object, such as a person, and then lastly, the word from. We also need to remember that the verb that follows from has to be in the ing form. So here's an example of that, using all of those pieces together. Mary kept her husband from smoking by hiding his cigarettes. In this sentence, Mary's husband wants to smoke, but he can't because he doesn't have any cigarettes. So we can see that she has kept him from smoking by doing something. The by there is showing what she did to achieve that result. She kept him from smoking, or she prevented him from smoking by taking away his cigarettes.
Prevent 这个动词呢，它有阻止或者是预防的意思。那这边用到了 prevent something from 什么事情 ，from 后面通常都是会接一个分词 ing 的句子，意思就是说你要免去做某件事情。那在课文里面呢，就是说希望可以避免这些事情再发生。We can also use stop 阻止 keep 防止 something from happening.
But here's a question. What if we don't want to prevent something? What if we want to make something happen? Well, there's a very similar grammar we can also use. It just takes a little bit of changing. Instead of using stop, prevent, or keep, we can use the verb get, and we can change the preposition from to. So if you get someone to do something, you encourage them to do it. So let's look at the sentence I just used again. Mary kept her husband from smoking by taking away his cigarettes. If we change that to Mary got her husband to smoke by buying him cigarettes, we've just changed it to the exact opposite. In this sentence, Mary wants her husband to smoke, and she encourages him to by buying him cigarettes. So get there is encourage, and just as from, we use the preposition from to talk about moving away from something, from preventing something. We use to, which means to move towards something, to mean that we are encouraging it. So get, object, to, and verb. There we go. Yeah, that's the training. Get, subject, object, verb, and to. To and verb. Yes, that is how we create that structure. Okay, well, that is all the time we have for looking at the content of this story. There's obviously a lot of stuff that we need to talk about in terms of the meaning of this story, isn't there? So we will be looking at that in day 3 of our article. But first, let's go through to our For You chat.
For You chat.
So for today's For You chat, the question is, can there ever be justice for Emmett and Jerome? What do you think?
I think that's a tricky thing to achieve. So the word justice means to have a fair situation after something bad has happened. So to find a happy place almost again, to make things all right again. So I think it's very difficult for there to be complete justice because
They're dead.
And both of them didn't do anything wrong. Both of them were innocent and they were both children. So to find justice, I think, would be very difficult. But perhaps
We can
from what
still, keep this from happening.
yeah, from what we hear in the story, it sounds like they're going to work towards fighting against racism, which is a term we'll talk about more in day 3. And so that works a bit towards justice, but I don't think that that is complete justice because young, innocent people died. Anyway, that's where we're going to leave day 2, and we will be rejoining you in day 3 to talk about the author and some of the important messages in this book. So we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ghost Boys. Jerome looks down. He sees a black boy on the floor in a pool of dark red blood. The boy is dead. The boy is him. There's a bullet wound in his back where the police officer shot him. Later, the officer will say that he thought Jerome was older. He'll say that he looked like a dangerous man. He'll say that the toy gun looked real. Now, Jerome observes as his family grieve for him, and the police officer defends himself. Jerome's not alone, though. He is joined by another ghost boy, Emmett Till. He lived decades before Jerome, but died in a similar way. Emmett was murdered in 1955 for appearing to insult a white lady. Later, Jerome and Emmett meet a living girl who can see and hear them. Sarah is the police officer's daughter. She knows that her father did something wrong, but she doesn't know what to do about it. Jerome and Emmett tell her what happened to them. From their words, she will learn to fight for justice and help prevent their stories from repeating.
Vocabulary Review.
Bullet. The police fired some rubber bullets at the crowd that is gathered outside the government building. Wound. My dad has a wound on his knee after he slipped and fell down the stairs. Observe. Arnold likes going to the forest near his house to observe the animals that live there. Decade. My family has lived in this house for over 5 decades. Similar. The shirts that are sold at this store look similar, and it's hard to see the differences. Prevent. Dad built a fence around our garden to prevent animals from eating the cabbages.
智慧小补帖
Grieve. Defend. Insult.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作，活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net